Hello and welcome to the Weekend Spectator. My name is Grace Reilly. I'm here with the one and only Paul Kengor, and we're going to be jumping through a lot of the biggest topics from this past week. It's been a crazy one. It always is. Paul, it's so great to be with you.
The great and gracious Grace. Good to be with you once again.
Always amazing to be with you. And of course, as Biden is closing out his presidency, he delivered a farewell address that I don't know if many people watched it. I actually hadn't watched it until we decided to discuss it on this podcast. And
Sorry
let me
about
tell you, when I started watching it, I realized exactly why I hadn't before.
that.
It was terrible.
Yeah, in fact, the only reason I watched it, or actually saw clips of it and read about most of it, was because I had a radio show that I had to do in response to it a couple days ago, and it's just terrible. And in fact, I compare it to Ronald Reagan's farewell address, which was done about this time in 1989, and that was a speech written by Peggy Noonan. It's a beautiful speech, Grace. I mean, it's really good. In fact, we have, as we're recording this right now, our lead piece on Friday at the American Spectator was by Ken Kachigan, who was helped write Reagan's first inaugural. And so it's a really good piece. And Ken's an old Reagan speechwriter, just as his memoirs come out. But even better than I think Reagan's inaugurals was his farewell address by Peggy Noonan. And in that one, he talked about America as a shining city upon a hill. He said, "Well, I don't think I ever explained what I meant by the shining city." And then, which he had actually,
That's a
but in
good
this one,
impression.
yeah, thank you.
That
I've
was
seen
perfect.
it so many times. But he said, windswept, God blessed, teeming with all kinds of people. And if a country had to have gates, the gates were open. So they could he talks about this rickety boat, the American founding fathers, Cuban boat people. I mean, it's an amazing speech. When we did a little book, 11 Principles of a Reagan Conservative, we had room for four speeches in the back. And the publisher, Al Regnery, said to me, "All right, what four do you want to do?" I said, "Well, for sure, I want one of them to be the farewell address, right?" And so it's this beautiful speech and truly unifying. And again, these liberals and the Democrats and Biden, they all talk about unifying. But if you watch or read that Biden speech, it's very divisive, and he's talking about oligarchs and class and millionaires and billionaires and all this class warfare junk. You can appreciate this. So today I taught my Marxism course at Grove City College, and it's the first week of that course. You remember that course? You had it, and
Oh,
I
favorite.
pull.
Loved it.
Thank you, and I pull up the websites of People's World, Communist Party USA. People's World is the flagship publication of Communist Party USA. And their lead was Biden's farewell address. And they loved it.
Oh, I'm
And they're
sure.
using all the language, oligarchs. They're selling mugs about fat cat billionaires and all this other stuff. And you look at that, and they're talking about the fascist Trump and Biden's speech, and you think, who's Biden's audience? Is
Well,
it really middle America, or is it these radical far lefties? And apparently, it's the latter.
yeah, well, and something that people pointed out, which was a great point, is yeah, as he's ranting about these oligarchs, and when I say ranting, the other thing about this speech is he could barely even pronounce things. He couldn't
I
even
know.
talk.
Right.
I mean, if this wasn't further proof of his mental decline, I mean, he could barely get through it. And you could tell, again, I mean, I'd love to hold this speech up next to him talking a few years ago or his intro speech whenever he was inaugurated, because I'm sure there would be a very clear change. I mean, the decline is very obvious. But in his rants about the oligarchy and everything else, people pointed out, well, he did just pardon his son. He just
Right.
awarded George Soros with a medal. Like, so that's crazy enough. And on the unity of Reagan's speech versus the divisiveness of this speech, of course, he ends it talking about how we need to hold tech companies accountable and how they're stopping the fact checking, and that's so bad.
Right.
This comes after Meta, Mark Zuckerberg has said, and by the way, I don't buy this at all in a genuine way of any sort. So I'm glad that Zuckerberg has now said that he's going to stop the fact checking and make Meta platforms more free speech again. But the
Yeah.
censorship over the past few years has been
Yeah.
so
Where was Zuckerberg 4 years ago? Right.
Yes, and it's
Yeah,
been so
yeah,
outrageous. Such
right,
outrageous censorship. And as someone that's worked in social media this entire time, I can tell you firsthand it's been the most outrageous censorship where it was not a free speech platform. You could not talk about certain things or your account would get flagged and your content would be suppressed. So after all of that, I mean, sorry that I'm not more uh happy and lighthearted and feeling all warm and fuzzy about Zuckerberg after
right.
after we experienced all of that. But on
Yeah.
that, so
By the way, we had a really good piece this week by Aubrey Gulick. People can check out
she's
on
wonderful.
Zuckerberg and his test. Yeah, and she really very thoughtfully went back and forth on what's Zuckerberg really mean, what's he doing. But he told Joe Rogan about that the Biden people were trying to tell them what they should, what they could and couldn't post regarding COVID.
Mhm.
And he said I could name names. Well, you know what? Name names.
Do it,
Who
yes.
are they? Who did this? And yeah, why wasn't Zuckerberg telling us about this 4 years ago during COVID? Why wasn't he telling us about this in September? I mean, he's been donating money to Democrats. He's only talking about it now because he's worried that I guess the Trump people are going to come after him. And by the way, it may be our friend who we've talked about many times, who's at the American Spectator Gala, RFK Jr. Maybe guys like him are going to come to Zuckerberg and others and say, okay, you accuse me of disinformation, misinformation, your new term, malinformation. You didn't give me a chance to put up any of my peer reviewed studies to try to counter what you were claiming was my disinformation. You wouldn't even let me respond. And so it's not like, I guarantee you the Trump people and RFK Jr. aren't going to look to shut these people down. They're not going to look for retribution, but they're probably going to try to at least straighten this stuff out. I mean, Zuckerberg should have been more afraid of the Democrats than of anything that's going to happen in the Trump administration.
Yeah, that's true and a great point. That's exactly what I was getting to. The fact that the Biden administration did, and that's proven, and Zuckerberg has said this, did try to censor information through these platforms. And it's funny and ironic that, of course, that was the ending of Biden's farewell address, him saying, we've got to be holding these media platforms accountable and basically encouraging censorship. So he ends
Right, right,
his speech complaining about fascism, dictators, this, that,
right.
and the other by saying, we've got to censor this information
It's
and
amazing,
make
isn't
sure
it?
the government is involved in fact checking.
Yeah,
Americans are being buried under an avalanche of misinformation and disinformation, enabling the abuse of power. The free press is crumbling. Editors are disappearing. Social media is giving up on fact checking. The truth is smothered by lies told for power and for profit. We must hold the social platforms accountable to protect our children, our families, and our very democracy from the abuse of power.
yeah.
Easy.
Yeah, we have once again these great advocates of democracy, right? Like RFK Jr. told us, with the Democrats, these people believe that they've got to, how did he put it? Um, uh, do something to democracy in order to save democracy. I can't remember what it was. Right,
Build
stop
democracy to
democracy in order to
save
save
it.
them.
Yeah.
Right, right, and yeah, and it's ironic. So as they're claiming they want free speech, they're censoring. As they're claiming they want diversity, they exclude people that they disagree with. In fact, related to this, I don't know if you knew I didn't tell you I was going to bring this up, but I was just emailing with Mark Joseph, who's from the producer of our Reagan movie. It looks like our Reagan movie has been banished from qualifications for the Oscars because it didn't meet enough DEI requirements in order to be considered for the Oscars. And there are a whole bunch of movies this year that are not allowed to even be considered for Oscars because they didn't meet the DEI requirements. Richard Dreyfuss, who's a big, longtime Hollywood liberal, but also a big free speech guy, kind of like a Bill Maher type, he hates this. I mean, he's really angry about this. And I emailed Mark. I said, what do we do that didn't have enough diversity? And then what are we supposed to do? But they want us to
Cast
create like
Reagan
a
as
gay
black.
character or something. Yeah, yeah.
Cast Reagan as black. That's what.
Yeah, well, and we have a scene in the movie with where Ronald Reagan brings home two black friends from the Eureka College football team who were denied a hotel. In fact, I put that scene in the script. I love that moment, and Grace, we put it in naturally, organically, not in order to say, hey, let's put some black people in the movie, right? We put it in because it's true, it's heartwarming, it's touching, and it's a part of Reagan's life. But these DEI folks, they want to shoehorn in certain types of individuals. I don't know whether they want us to have a transgender character or something from 1940s Hollywood. Make William Holden transgender as the best man at Reagan and Nancy's wedding or something. It's just bizarre.
It is. Well, and that kind of goes into the new initiative by Trump to have Hollywood ambassadors, Mel
Oh, I love
Gibson,
this.
John Voight. There, so that's super interesting. And if you want to share more about that, I haven't looked as much into it, but it looks pretty cool, and definitely relates exactly to this.
Yeah, yeah. So Donald Trump has named three new Hollywood ambassadors. And by the way, I think this is just the kind of thing Trump does to really stick a knife to the other side. Just likes to see him scream, right? And the three ambassadors, you could probably guess at least a couple of them, right? But one is Mel Gibson. The other is John Voight, who plays Victor, the KGB agent, Victor Petrovich in our Reagan movie. And the other is a great Sylvester Stallone, Rocky. So those are his three Hollywood ambassadors. I don't know what exactly they're going to do, right? I mean, but
Oh,
but maybe it's kind of like an honorific title, or maybe throw sand in the shorts of liberals in Hollywood title. I don't know, but it made me laugh, and I think it's funny. I like it. I think it's pretty cool.
yeah, no, I saw that too. In Hollywood, I mean, yeah, I'm rooting for it to be great again, but
Right? Make Hollywood great again. There you
yeah,
go.
make Hollywood great again, make health great again, everything. That's why he's calling it the golden age, I suppose.
Yeah, like the golden age of movies in Hollywood, right? Golden
Yeah.
age of Trump, which includes three Hollywood ambassadors: Mel Gibson, John Voight, and Sylvester Stallone. It's really funny.
Well, and I do just want to mention too, so this makes me think of actually something you go over in your Marxism class, which is looking into the Marxist roots of Hollywood and looking at all sorts of actors through the years as the Communist Party USA kind of took root here, and infiltrated Hollywood. That we should do a whole episode on that at some point, especially if something comes of these new ambassadors, just to look back over history, because I just think it's so interesting to look at all of that throughout history and look at the ways that it's impacted Hollywood and the culture then from that.
Yeah, in fact, if you look today, it's either Communist Party USA's website, cpusa.org, or the People's World website. And they have a piece up about Albert Maltz and his wife. And Albert Maltz was one of the Hollywood 10. He was one of the Communist Party USA members who were every single member, folks, listen, of the Hollywood 10 were Communist Party USA members. We had their membership cards, their numbers, their five-digit membership numbers. We had that in October 1947 when they testified, some of them before the House Committee on Un-American Activities. They all swore a loyalty oath to Stalin's Soviet Union. And so for people today still trying to say, they're just a bunch of progressives being hounded by Joe McCarthy, go read Communist Party literature right now at the website at this moment and see this Valentine of a profile they're doing about the great Marxist Albert Maltz. These people were Marxists, and they tried to infiltrate Hollywood with Marxist messages and through their films.
Yeah, absolutely. And the person who gets the gold badge for not falling into this is Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, and Reagan. I mean, Reagan at first was a liberal. He called himself a hemophiliac liberal, right? A bleeding heart liberal. And Reagan became an after dinner speaker in Hollywood, 45, 46, 1947. And he soon realized that many of these progressive groups that he was speaking for were actually communist fronts. I talk about this in a bunch of my different Reagan books. In fact, I got a big long chapter in my book, Dupes, about this. Reagan's real awakening that first pushed him to the right, even more so than like FDR's 91% tax rates, was when he realized that these liberals and progressives were in fact hardcore Marxists dedicated to the Soviet Union. And when he tried to expose them, he got viciously attacked, called all sorts of names, fascist, Nazi, Hitler, everything else. That's really what began moving Ronald Reagan to the conservative side.
Yeah, really cool and crazy stuff. And a lot, that's why I think we should do an episode on it because there's just so much
Yeah, we should.
there. and it is super interesting. But another thing that we wanted to cover this week is Jimmy Carter's funeral. Of course, you had all of these huge world leader politicians,
Right.
people who had held the presidency here in the United States, and much more all sitting together. But you focused on a much more interesting point, which was the song choice.
Yeah. Yeah, it was so weird. And by the way, I got to say, once again, we saw how the liberals in one moment will call Trump a Hitler, fascist, Nazi, and everything else. Then a few weeks after he wins the election, he's sitting there with Joe Biden in front of the fireplace of the White House. They look like old chums, like they're going to go have a beer together.
Yeah,
And there,
Obama, yeah.
and there he was with Obama. And I love the image of him and Obama kind of, joking together.
And
And
Kamala.
yeah. Kamala had to look like, I don't want to talk to either one of you. But I read a number of different liberals on social media that were kind of offended. They're like, Barack, I thought this guy was Hitler, right? I
I mean,
mean,
and
come
they have
on.
a right to be, actually. That's
Yeah,
how awful the Democrats are to the American people to constantly be spewing this. And of course, it's all
right.
BS.
Is he? Yeah. In fact, a lot of liberals have got to be thinking, is this guy the guy you're telling us he is or not? Or are you just trying to get us riled up? Is he destroying democracy and Hitler and a Nazi fascist or not? Right. As soon as you sit down with him, you joke with him, you're buddies with him. So it really ought to tell them how they're being used with this kind of poisonous rhetoric that, as Donald Trump pointed out in his second debate with Kamala Harris, he said, all this kind of language, I'm going to be a threat to democracy. That's what got me nearly assassinated. So yeah, this is what they do, right? But yeah, in regard to Carter's funeral service at the National Cathedral, here again, I didn't watch it. Like I didn't watch the farewell address. I read parts of it. I saw clips of it, and I was just floored to find out that Jimmy Carter's favorite hymn. Now you would think this is the original, like born again Southern Baptist Bible man from the 1970s, right? Helped popularize the term born again along with Chuck Colson, and that was a good thing that he did. You would think that he would pick Amazing Grace, Old Time Religion, something like that. Grace, he picked Imagine by John Lennon of all
Really
things.
bad.
And Imagine by
That's really concerning and bad. That is not a Christian song at all.
it really is. And I talked about it in one of my
Not the way to
classes.
go out. That's not a
No,
good omen.
no, and I have mixed views on John Lennon. I talk in the article at the end of his life. Now this was 1980, December 1980, and my friend Mark Joseph, again the director of the Reagan, producer of the Reagan movie, has written about this. Lennon, by the end of his life, was watching Pat Robertson, Oral Roberts, Billy Graham, had met with Reagan. Was
Wow,
he?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, was looking at becoming quite possibly a born again Christian. Yoko Ono, the evil, hideous
Yeah.
Yoko Ono, stopped him, right? Which is so sad. This guy in December 1980 shot and assassinated outside of his apartment. Hopefully, he accepted Christ despite Yoko Ono, right? Before that happened, because that's the only thing that matters in that moment is his eternal soul, right? But to her, she's concerned that John Lennon is right considering Christianity. But the Lennon who wrote Imagine in 1971 was very different. It's a very flaky, relativistic, almost new age-ish, who knows what kind of song. Hard to even understand exactly what it means. But he talks about imagine no heaven, no hell, imagine all possessions, imagine no possessions. Come join us, he says at the end of it. Why would that be Jimmy Carter's chosen song for his National Cathedral service? Other than I wrote a piece of this in Crisis Magazine. Other than that, Carter's just weird. I mean, the guy's always been such a weirdo. And I think that's a
Weird
fittingly
choice.
weird way to go for Carter.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, I don't even know what else to say about it. It is a
Right?
weird
It
is
does kind of
weird.
leave you speechless, doesn't it? It's like, could you imagine sitting there at that moment and who sang it but Garth Brooks? I like Garth Brooks. I like some country music. And Trisha Yearwood. I think they're married now, aren't they?
I don't
Um,
think so.
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
actually
because Garth
remember.
is divorced, which is sad because he wrote a couple really nice songs, but which hit a lot of his fans kind of hard. But anyway, so they sang it together, which makes it even stranger. And that was his song. So in my piece in Crisis Magazine, I compared it to Reagan's National Cathedral service. I watched that whole thing. I covered it for the media, and Reagan, Ronan Tynan, the Irish tenor, comes out and belts out Ave Maria. And I'm watching that, I'm thinking, whoa. But we also sang Amazing Grace. And Bill Clark, who was there, I was very close to Bill Clark, became his biographer. He was Reagan's closest aide and friend and like spiritual partner. Bill was like almost like another grandfather to me. Um, Bill Clark called me as soon as he got out of the National Cathedral, and he said, tell me about what happened. I said, Bill, Ave Maria, Ave Maria. Why did they play that? He said, Paul, I held it together pretty well through the whole service, but when I heard that, I just fell apart. I just fell apart. I said, Bill, Ave Maria, Hail Mary. Why did Reagan, why that? He said, I don't know. Let's find out, right? So we waited a little bit, gave Nancy Reagan some time and space. And I reached out to Nancy through Joanne Drake, her close aide. And I went back and checked when I compiled all of this for my book, A Pope and a President. I asked Nancy this question like 4 times, right? And we found out Reagan himself picked that song. Reagan himself picked that song when he was still compos mentis at that before he had Alzheimer's. He was already planning his funeral, like 1995, 96, 97, before he really faded from Alzheimer's. And so the contrast between Reagan picking Ave Maria and Jimmy Carter picking Imagine. No wonder Carter lost 44 out of 50 states to Reagan, right?
No, exactly, exactly. And we'll see too, the tides are turning because a bunch of country artists just decided that they would be performing at Trump's inauguration, which did not
Yeah.
happen in 2017.
Carrie
And
Underwood, right?
Carrie Underwood is Jason Aldean, which is unsurprising.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, and a few others too. So it's really cool to see celebrities uh be more bold about stuff like this in a way that they hadn't been before and be focused on unity and just celebrating um something so important, which is this historical event, of course. Uh
And everybody's tired of being attacked by the left.
yes,
And we're at the point now in 2025 where so many of these people we're talking about have been canceled, silenced, and we're at the point where we're just like, you know, the heck with you, man. We're going to do it anyway, right? No, we're going to go. We're going to play at it. Period. I don't care what you say. What are you going to do? Cancel me again? Right?
exactly. Exactly. And for all of you listening, the next time that we talk to you, Donald Trump will be your president. So congratulations in
Right?
advance for that. It's going to be a crazy week. Goodbye to Joe Biden. How amazing is it to say goodbye to Joe Biden? Very good, very good. I feel great
Worst
about
4 years since Jimmy Carter.
yeah, really, really bad 4 years. But and oh, quickly before we close, we talked last week about the hostages, right? And of
Yeah.
course, as we said, the needle was moved this week by Trump, for at least a partial hostage exchange. We'll see what continues to happen, but there's no question the needle moved in the right
Yeah.
direction.
That might be our subject for this time next week, right? If we see, because he said, and I wrote about this for us at Spectator, that he said his January 6th press conference, if they're not all released by the time of his inauguration, all hell will break loose in the Middle East. So this time next week, I don't know. We'll see what that might look like.
Yeah, and we will see you then. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this episode of The Weekend Spectator. Make sure that you share with your friends, like, subscribe to stay up to date with the latest episodes. We are excited to see you next week when Trump is president again. Enjoy, and thanks for being with us.
Grazie, Grace. We'll see you next week.